Hello, this is Abby.
Dear Abbey, this is gonna be a long one.
Oh boy.
Dear Abbey, how do you tell the difference between a new exciting crush and a rebound?
Does it matter?
Dear Abbey.
Dear Abbey.
Dear Abbey.
Welcome to our little corner of the internet. This is the Dear Abbey podcast. I hope you stay and hang out with us. See you in a sec. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Dear Abbey. I'm your host. My name is Abby. Welcome back. We have a great episode planned today. I continued to say we, even though it is I, but I mean us. Me and you guys. Me and all the different voices in my head. I'm joking. I always feel so old when I start recording because I grab a pillow and I have to tuck it under my low back. So that way my low back's supported. Or else my back starts to hurt in like 5 minutes, 10 minutes sitting here. But here we are. I'm happy to be here. It's been a heck of a week, a heck of a month. I talked about how I've been doing last week. We're going to do in the details. We'll do a quick dub and L. Then we'll talk about the meat of today's episode. And then we'll do a Dear Abbey. And the meat of today's episode, we are talking about the brain. I wanted to talk about the experience of when you struggle with something mentally, like OCD. For example, you can sometimes develop a really bad relationship with your mind and with your brain as a whole. And that sometimes can be related to and because of certain obsessions that you may have with your mind, with your brain, with your body, with consciousness, with all of these things that come from your brain. Sometimes just because of an OCD obsession, it can kind of taint or ruin the relationship you have with your mind and your body. And that's not a small thing. Sometimes with OCD recovery or just with struggling in life, we feel like we have to downplay what's ailing us and what's hurting us because no one else talks about it, or maybe we don't hear about it, or maybe everyone else seems to just like be sucking it up and continuing through life. But that's not a great way to live. And if you're not happy and you're not feeling fulfilled and purpose and meaning and more freedom within your own body and your own mind, then you can be gifted and you can learn how to enjoy parts of your life more and feel more free in your own mind and your own brain and your own body. And then let's take a moment and say hello to the landscaper in the background, if anyone can hear that. I used to say this when I taught yoga, was if you hear any outside noise when we're doing like a meditation or something, I'd always say let that sound, rather than be a distraction and thinking that no, it needs to be totally quiet, let it draw you deeper within yourself, within the meditation. And what acceptance can we practice? Hearing an annoying sound in the background. I don't have a perfect podcast. I'm very sorry. I pick a bad time to record every week. Going back to the meat of today's episode. So it can be tainted, or your relationship with your brain can be ruined by obsession specifically, and your illness specifically, or just if you struggle mentally in general, sometimes that just puts a bad taste in your mouth and you start to only feel and see the bad parts about having a brain and a mind and a thinking mind. And this is talking from, and I'm speaking of fully experience. So this is not this is not like therapeutic or anything like that. This is literally just, I'm going to talk from my experience and things that I've noticed and maybe ways that I am trying to currently heal my relationship with my brain and with my mind and my body. That mind, body, soul connection is very important, and it's a hard thing to balance, and it's not going to be totally perfect or constant, but there are times where we can get there and we feel like everything's working, and there's like a synchronicity to how we are functioning and using our mind and then our body and then our soul, and it's like all like a well-oiled machine. So I'm going to name a couple like brain OCD obsessions, or maybe things that can make you anxious. I'm going to briefly touch on disassociation, or like depersonalization, derealization, those types of experiences, because I think that plays a major role in how you experience your own body and mind, and how after that can kind of be like a traumatizing experience. And I say that with some understanding of like what the word trauma means and how it can affect you. And if you experience really scary things mentally for a long time, I've heard therapists, psychologists say that it can have the same effect as other experiences you would deem as traumatizing. So again, to validate or to bring to attention some things that you may suppress or act like it's not a big deal, but that are actually deeply hurting you and have hurt you. And that maybe extra support is needed there. This can also be a helpful podcast if you know somebody that struggles mentally, or maybe if you just have your own experience with your brain that you just want to feel a little bit better about it and have a better relationship and work with your brain versus against it. And so I'm going to share those OCD obsessions, and then I'm going to talk about things that actually might help and the miracle of the brain and just small ways to maybe rewire or to utilize like the miracle and the amazing things that your brain already does, but also maybe just bring those to attention and also talk about the ways that you can utilize your brain to feel better. So before we go into that, let's get into the details. I talk a lot about vulnerability on this podcast. I've always been drawn to it. I feel very sensitive in my day-to-day life, and not that like I always get my feelings hurt sensitive, even though that also can happen, but it's more so it's almost impossible for me not to feel intensely about a lot of things that happen throughout my day. It's a very physical sensation for me. It's really hard, and it feels so unnatural and not good to ignore the things that I am sensitive over, which can feel like everything. But I've grown to love that about myself, and but I still struggle with balancing like being sensitive with also not being easily offended and like all of these different things. It's you have to learn again how to work with myself on the experiences that I have with being sensitive. A way to explain sometimes when I feel sensitive is I feel extremely vulnerable. I don't know how to shield myself sometimes from feelings or from experiences or from something that I see. It sticks with me, and I don't know how to get it to unstick. That's something that I really struggle with. And I remember in therapy, I talked about this a lot with my therapist, and she kind of helped me a little bit with how to not internalize everything. And I struggle with that very badly, but I got good at it. And now I feel like I'm seeping back into that habit of internalizing things. I think it's also gets sticky with OCD is this, internalized, like if I see something, I'm scared that I am that. If I see something in the news, if I see something in front of me, if I hear about something, I'm scared that what I see, what I hear becomes who I am. And that's very much an OCD way of thinking, because that's not how the world works. That's not how things work. But for me and my brain and that's how I'm scared of that being true. And it feels like there's a warning with that, and it's scary. Anyways, oh my gosh, I digress again. I feel vulnerable a lot. And I talk about vulnerability a lot on the podcast as something that like you have to let yourself be vulnerable. And I still agree with that. However, I was thinking this week, just probably driving to work, because I think about a bunch of stuff while I'm driving to work. It's the only time that I can like actually enjoy and look at the horizon, and I can think clearly alone. And I just was thinking how we are always vulnerable, like as human beings, even if you're not necessarily letting yourself be vulnerable. We're very fragile, vulnerable beings, period. We are always vulnerable. It's not a matter of becoming vulnerable. Like, we are mortal beings. Mortal equals vulnerable. So rather than letting yourself be vulnerable, I think it's more just almost like accepting your vulnerability as a strength and as something that creates purpose and meaning versus something that can create dread and fear. So we all have weaknesses. We all are vulnerable. But if you accept that vulnerability and open yourself up to it, because we already are vulnerable, but it's again just a matter of accepting that vulnerability and seeing it as a strength and a good thing, then I think there's a lot of peace that can come with that. At least for me, there has been, but everybody's different. But that's just something that I was thinking about in the details of my life. So thank you for listening to that, if that made any sense. It also is a practice of accepting the uncertainty that comes with being mortal and being a human being, that and the automatic vulnerability that accompanies that. Okay, next, Dubs and L's. Dub, my husband and I, we had our first 1-year anniversary, which is really crazy. It's already been a year. Congrats to us. Thank you. We went to hot springs a little bit further inland in California, and they were amazing. It was super fun. My favorite part was there was a worker there, and he is like a breath work guy. He studies that. He teaches it there. And he does sound baths. He does all of these, like this vitality plunge, which is hot, cold, like contrast therapy that my husband and I did with him. And he was explaining when he was talking about the cold plunge, he was telling us all about it, like the benefits, that sometimes people push themselves too far and it actually has still some benefits, but a lot of kind of negative side effects. He was teaching us that women are advised not to do cold plunges below, I believe it was like 48.7 degrees and under, to avoid doing cold plunges that cold because, and men won't experience, it can go down to like 38 or something way lower, because women experience hormone shifts within that. So it can literally shift your hormones for the next day or for a little while after. So you can be feeling great in the cold plunge, and instead of you just feeling the benefits and you feel like yourself throughout the day and you're alert, you feel anxious. So you're not just alert. You now have this cortisol and you're now pumping, and it doesn't just go away. It starts to stay. So your mood can change because it starts to shift your hormones in a more like an unnatural way, which could cause you to have the feeling that usually causes, or what people would say is like more grumpy, moody. But you feel internally your hormones have shifted. So it's a very real thing that's happening to you. You're not, making it up. You're not just naturally grumpy. Your feelings are changing because you did a little bit too cold of a cold plunge for a little bit too long too. And it felt good to hear because sometimes as a woman, you spend so much time trying to validate your own feelings and how intensely you can feel about things, or your highs and lows, or your hormones, and how you can physically feel the difference, and kind of where you're at in your cycle because of how you feel, and that's a very real experience. And it's not something that we do to us, it happens to us. And sometimes like we're told that we're crazy, and so that sticks with us. That doesn't feel good to be called crazy because you're having an experience that's very real, but then you're being called crazy, or that we're just being dramatic or something. And so sometimes it feels like we're always battling this validation in our head. But to have a man who's very well spoken about this, he's studied it, this is what he does professionally, explain something to you that you couldn't quite put a finger on, and then when he said it, you're like, oh, that makes sense, I'm not making it up. It always feels good. And then my L, I think, is I have felt a little bit self-conscious. I think I have just had a lot of social anxiety, but it's been pretty bad because I like hang out with people more. I have like more friends, but it's making me feel way more anxious than it does. Like I just can relax. So stay tuned for what happens with that. So I don't know. I am an introverted person at heart. I try to be extroverted, and I get really tired being social, but I don't know if that's just my anxiety or why, whatever it is. That's just how I experience life and those things. So anyways, that's now laying up at night after I say one stupid thing and I'm thinking about it for like 2 weeks, and then I beat myself up, and then every moment that I have to relax, it's eaten up by the voices in my head that tell me that everything I say is stupid and that everybody hates me. But anyways, thus be life. Okay, let's move on to the me of today's episode. So it's so depressing. Let's talk about the me of today's episode, shall we? The me of today's episode, again, we're talking about the brain. I'm going to name off and tell me if you've experienced any of these as well, from anxiety or OCD or depression. Like they all sometimes can intermingle, or it's just one. Your experience is your experience. Doesn't have to match mine either. So just a reminder. But I'm going to name off some obsessions that I've had with my brain, or that I've heard other people talk about. These things can definitely taint or ruin your relationship. Not forever, because we can work on this, but might ruin your relationship and with your brain and your mind. Okay, first obsession. And also, before I start naming these are obsessions. So sometimes these can be triggering if you're like struggling with something. If you're struggling with OCD, or if someone says something and you kind of start obsessing over that, just an FYI, you can handle it. Maybe not, but I am going to start naming some obsessions. So just know that it might trigger something. So use your tools, or if you don't want to do that, you can skip like 15 minutes into the episode to get to the other stuff. One of the main obsessions that I had for a while when I was dealing with existential OCD is just your consciousness. I was hyper aware of my consciousness and being aware. And that was hell on earth. That was the hardest thing that I think I've experienced with my OCD because it felt like torture. I don't know how to explain it other than that, but I overcame it. Okay. So if you're struggling with that and you feel like you can't stop thinking about stuff like that, a lot of people have experienced that and we have overcome it and we are living happy, healthy lives. And yes, it can maybe one day it'll come back, but we'll know how to handle it and so will you. And it does not, that obsession isn't who you are. That obsession, those thoughts that you can't let go of, that's not who you are. And you can overcome that. But it is unrelenting and can be very hard. So that's one obsession that definitely makes you not like your brain. And then that kind of goes along with depersonalization and derealization, the experience of not feeling connected to your body, to yourself. You're looking at your hand and you're like, this doesn't look like my hand, or I don't feel any connection to this, even though I've seen it a million times before. And that's horrifying and can be, especially at the beginning. However, the more resistant you are to that and the more scared you tell yourself you are and the bigger reactions that you have to those experiences when they happen, sometimes the longer it'll stick, the stickier it gets. And from what I understand from videos I've watched when I was struggling with it, that's all I watched on YouTube. A little bit of like a reassurance thing, but I watched so many videos about depersonalization and derealization because I've never experienced it like that before. And it was like probably a full year of that. And I was just completely detached and it felt so uncomfortable. I feel like I was caged up in a place in my brain that kept me from connection, love, anything that brought me joy was just so far away from me is what it felt like. But look at me now. Professionals will say that experience of disassociate or that experience of derealization or depersonalization is just your brain trying to protect you from really intense feelings, really intense experiences, circumstances, and sometimes it can be from substances as well. That's what mine came from, kind of accidentally from something that I was told would not do anything to me, and it definitely did. And I will steer clear from any of that stuff for the rest of my life. So it can be triggered by a lot of different things, and it feels really scary. It feels like something bigger is happening. However, science shows that your brain is just trying to handle whatever's happening to you, is trying to protect you. And sometimes it feels like you broke. It's a scary feeling. I think that's helpful to learn about is what's actually happening on the physical level because it makes you understand the whys and not blow it out of proportion. So those definitely can make you feel like your brain is just out to get you. It's not working. It's all bad. And it's really hard to feel that way. It's really discouraging to feel that way. So hopefully, if you feel that way, by the end of the episode, you'll start to at least feel a little bit more connected to your brain in a more positive way and realize like it's not all bad and it's actually trying to help us and it's our ally, our biggest ally. So a couple more obsessions really fast before we get into like how to help and other things like that. Another obsession can be just intrusive thoughts alone. Like, why do I have intrusive thoughts? And then obviously you might get stuck on the content of the thoughts, but you might just be so annoyed that your brain is sending you intrusive thoughts about things you don't want, you don't like, you're exhausted by it. And so that'll definitely annoy you about your brain is like, why is my brain broken like this? Why does it feel broken? Why is it sending me all of these thoughts? And to speak on the whys, when you have OCD or sometimes anxiety, you might have a stickier brain. So you have a stickier part of your brain that's like sensing danger. So let's say you get an intrusive thought about hurting somebody, an intrusive thought about, or just an intrusive image or something that you don't like, that you're like disgusted by or whatever it is. You might see that, feel that, and have a reaction mentally and physically or whatever, being like, ugh, get that thought away from me. And you have a big reaction. The part of your brain that's trying to sense danger is like, oh my gosh, danger, danger, connects the two dots. And it's like, okay, we got to solve this. I'm going to try to solve this, which I'm like, that part of your brain that tries to solve things, I swear is so connected because I always feel like I need to solve it, get to the bottom of why I'm getting these thoughts and then get it away. And then you try to solve it and send more danger because maybe the thoughts keep getting worse because it's trying to get your attention again and saying, hey, remember this freaked you out? We got to solve this. Remember this. Remember this. So from my not professional knowledge, that's what it's doing from what I've heard, my interpretation. But there are a lot of podcasts and things out there and YouTube videos that explain it a lot better than that. But that was essentially what is happening with obsessive compulsive disorder to some extent. Another obsession can be like false memory and trying to remember stuff and feeling like you can't remember. Another obsession can be health OCD. That's like having a stroke or, going into psychosis, going crazy. So sometimes I would be scared to say those words and I still get a little bit of a spike if I say those words because I'm scared it's going to actually just switch something and I'm going to all of a sudden go crazy in a second or say the word and it's going to happen to me, which leads me to my next obsession. How powerful is your thinking and being obsessed with figuring out like almost magical thinking, and how powerful is my brain? How powerful is this thing that I'm using, and trying to figure it out and trying to figure out what your brain even is. Because sometimes it's like, what the heck even is it? It's kind of a crazy concept, but we can't figure it out. That is one thing 100% you will never figure out because it's like above us, and that can be hard. And also this can be very triggering to talk about. So practice your tools, let it go, surrender, practice it with the uncertainty if this is triggering. So all of those things are annoying to deal with and exhausting and hard. So sometimes all of those experiences can start to make us dislike our own brain and our own head. And I talked a little bit about what's happening sometimes with these things that can make us feel scared of our own head, of our own brain. But that's definitely not always going to fix it, hearing those facts. Sometimes it is really a matter of sitting with yourself and being uncomfortable for a bit, letting those thoughts and those fears and that disconnection kind of come up, or fear kind of come up, and then face it. But I wanted to just talk about the wonderful, amazing, incredible thing that your brain is, to remind you and just to have more positive thoughts kind of flood your brain. Your brain is what allows you to feel and allows you to experience really fully. You have your body that can touch things and move and jump, but that sends signals to your brain, and that's how you experience life. And so it's not some scary unknown thing, even though there's things that are unknown about it. We know that it is for good. We know that you can feel so amazing and that you can do amazing things with your brain. So you can see, feel, touch, smell, hear, because of the signals that are being sent to your brain and how that helps us experience and feel those things and be one with them. So that's an incredible thing that was made, I believe, by God for good, for you and for me and for everyone. That's also why I'm a big believer in getting medication if you feel like you need it, or getting help, because sometimes it doesn't feel like these things are for our good, and we need help and support sometimes to get back to that place where they are for our good. And sometimes we need that extra help and support and medicine, healing. Another amazing thing about your brain is that you can think. And you might sometimes with OCD think, I wish that I didn't have to think. I wish I never had to think anything. Thinking and creativity and creating and picturing things in your mind start to become so frustrating and sad and scary when you have anxiety or OCD or depression. Like things are turned to muck. It feels like things are darkened. Through support, help, recovery work, medicine, all of those things can be like healed and restored to where we have this freedom to think, to solve the problems of the world, to, if you're to a scientist, to solve these things that can really help people. People who created medication and had a desire to help people struggling mentally, saw a need for it. They used their brains to figure it out. It's really incredible. And really, it's incredible what our brains can remember, even though it's annoying that sometimes with OCD brains, they remember a little bit too much and they send it over and over and over again. Your brain is processing things all day long. And it's so amazing what it can remember. Like it gives you your memory of things that aren't happening right now, but you can remember the things that are good. Like you remember the things that are good in this life. And your brain allows you to do that and to feel that and to feel like you're in the moment again. So your brain is a miracle that allows you to think and problem solve. And hey, us OCD people, us OCD people or people that have it and anxiety, they're probably very thoughtful people because their brain is firing, and they think about things very deeply, and that's a really cool thing to have. Even if sometimes it's on kind of useless stuff that doesn't really get anywhere, we have that capability to think deeply about things and to think about things at different angles. And so we can use that into something more useful. And then one of the most amazing things about your brain is its ability to learn and adapt. It's processing all the time. There's a million things firing. There's so much information being fed, and it is like a muscle. Like we can work our minds like a muscle. And that is so cool to me, that you can change your life because you change your mind, or you can practice mindfulness. You can practice your OCD recovery stuff like ERP. You can practice ACT therapy or internal systems. There's so many things that you can utilize that are built for your brain and that are studied, things that were studied, medications, whatever. They were studied to help your brain. They were created to help your brain. And there's stuff to back it up. There's evidence to back it up. So it is a muscle that can be trained. I heard some therapist, I don't remember who it is. I'm so bad at quoting things. I'm so sorry. If I had a team, I would be so good at this stuff. I heard a therapist talk about how you have to treat your brain like a baby a little bit. Not the sense of you can't handle anything, because I think that kind of ruins the point. But in regards to, you have to train it and you have to work it and help it learn things, learn new things. It can be, it gets a little bit harder the older you get. It's still possible though. You can still learn new things and practice new things and keep your brain smart and sharp. So, and if you're struggling with something mentally, it doesn't mean that your brain is like so broken, and it doesn't mean that your brain is worse than everybody else's or you are somehow more damaged. It can just mean that we need to train it in certain ways. Just like if someone has bad knees, this is just saying someone has bad knees. Other people might not have bad knees, but that's because maybe they played a certain sport. They did certain things that helped build the muscles that supported the knee. That way, when they got older and they kept doing those things, their knee is supported because that's just how they grew up. They grew up doing that. And some of us, depending on like our childhood, or if it took 20 something years, like in my case, to get diagnosed as you have obsessive compulsive disorder, here is what you need to do to recover. Here are your options. That is a lot of time that I spent ingraining things and teaching my brain one thing. But the amazing thing is you can teach it something else, and something that's more like from your heart or from you. You have to believe at least a little bit, like open that belief door a little bit, to just let a little bit of that wisdom and somebody helping, or some therapist helping, or something, or trusting in like a higher power. Just open that door maybe a little bit to trust that things can get better, your brain can get better, and you can work this muscle to your advantage, and to where you can work with your brain like a well-oiled machine, like I said, where you can teach it what's more beneficial for you. You can handle it. You don't need to sit in the back seat anymore, or sit in the passenger seat while your brain and your OCD takes the driver's seat. Like, you can be the driver and put your brain in the back seat, in the passenger seat. I'm driving this. You can sit there and help me and give me directions sometimes if I ask. That's all I wanted to say about the brain. And I will be relooking at how I'm speaking to myself and how I'm speaking to my brain when I am alone at night, thinking about all of my social anxieties and experiencing all of the thoughts. I will try to remind myself, because I talked about this today, that my brain is just trying to help me, and maybe there's something that this is showing me, something subconscious that I need to like let go of. I just need to be confident. I need to not care what people think, or if I'm, whatever it is. Okay, thank you for listening to that. We'll do a Dear Abbey, and then we will end today's episode. My work people are texting me, and I don't want to respond. Okay, this is a bit of a longer Dear Abbey, so buckle up, buckaroos. She says, Dear Abbey, I feel like my boyfriend and I might be nearing the end of our relationship. To give some context, we've been together almost 2 years and done long distance for 1.5 years. We have been fighting a lot recently and seem to have little patience for each other. I was recently diagnosed with OCD, and my obsessions often revolve around my relationship. However, the thing I want advice on is about a big issue that we've had from the beginning of our relationship. He doesn't have a driver's license and he lives with his parents. We're both 25 and he's been living with his parents to save money, which totally makes sense. But sometimes it feels like he isn't as responsible because he relies on his parents so much. He lives in a city where he mostly takes public transportation, but he still gets rides from his parents on occasion. Whenever he visits me, I do all the driving, including when we go on road trips. He knows that it has really bothered me for quite some time, and although he keeps saying he will get his license, he has only gone to practice driving in a parking lot once since we've been together. He's a type to procrastinate, which drives me crazy. He's the only serious relationship I've ever had, and I do love him. And we've talked about moving in together and building a future together, but with everything going on recently, I'm starting to question whether we're a good fit. Is it silly to break up over this? What would you do if your partner knows something bothers you, but doesn't make any progress towards working on it? He also has made it clear he never wants to drive, but he would for me, which I don't think is a fair ask. Your advice would be greatly appreciated. I listen every week and find your podcast incredibly helpful. I'm processing. I'm trying to put myself in both shoes. Give me 1 second. I'm almost done. Okay. Thank you for trusting me on this one. I would say, okay, you're writing in. Obviously, you probably feel deeply hurt that he's not taking initiative, which is that's a very real thing to be hurt by, because especially if you are taking initiative on things and you are trying to be better, we're trying to like please him, you're trying to be like a good girlfriend and you're trying to do all the things right and you're trying to help him. And then if you feel like you're not getting that in return, that's extremely hurtful. And that is a very real thing to consider moving on from somebody because of. It's tricky to say like, you should or you shouldn't break up because I'm not in the relationship, so I don't know. However, it's totally normal to feel like you want to end something because you keep getting hurt by it. If he keeps making promises that he's not keeping, that's different. If he's promising something and he's saying he's going to do something and he never does, then that is a serious thing. In my books, that would be like, hey, I don't think you care about me because I'm telling you something that if you cared about me, I've told you something that I really need from you and you're not even flinching or being consistent. Like I need someone who's consistent. It's weird in relationships because you don't really want to set ultimatums, you know? So to me, I mean, that's not helpful and that's not the answer. Also, adding on the layer of having a relationship OCD, that does make everything feel a lot more intense. Something I think to think about that's telling is it just this one area of you've maybe asked him to get a license and he hasn't done it, but he does a lot of other things and takes initiative on a lot of other things. Like he'll plan stuff, he'll do a lot of things for you that you also care about and that you've communicated? Or is it like anything that you've kind of communicated he doesn't do? Because that I would probably end a relationship that was like that. It's very hurtful when you communicate your feelings or when you communicate something you need in a very direct way, especially like, hey, I would love if you got your license because I sometimes just want to be able to not have to be in charge, you know, something like that. Because I think it does feel good when a guy is able to take some of that mental load, because women have a lot of mental load and guys do too. But as a partnership, if you want some time to not have to figure the logistics of everything out and give that to somebody else, then that's totally fair to ask him to do. If it's like one of the things, if he does a lot of other things that you ask him to do or that you've opened up about that he takes initiative on, I'd say work with him and be really patient. It just could be one of those things that you have to be really patient on. Eventually, maybe he'll understand. Yeah, I don't know. OCD does kind of make it tricky because I know the feeling of thinking that your significant other is the absolute worst, but knowing deep down or knowing some part of you is like, okay, well, I actually trust him and I'm looking at all the facts and what he's actually done and it's not lining up to how I feel. So I think there's I'm blind to something, or it's, you know, the timing of when I'm feeling this and what I'm seeing is not, you know, 1-to-1. He's the problem. He's why I feel this way. But there are times where I did end relationships or at least cut off communication because I had expressed something that was deeply hurting me or that I needed from them and they weren't providing and they didn't show any initiative. So I don't know if this is actually helpful, but it's up to your discretion. What do you really want out of a relationship? And is this it? Do you want to do this forever with this person? If you feel like you can be patient in this one area, then you can decide to just have it be one thing that eventually maybe he'll change, but you have to be okay if he never changes, because some people never change, stuff like that. Or is it something where you're like, I love this person, but I'm not like in love with them anymore, and I don't want to keep trying to get there because I don't feel like they're doing the same thing. So if the efforts are not matching, and I will say that is something that you might, that even with OCD, especially if you're doing better or you're in recovery or whatever, I do have a sense now what it feels like when somebody's putting in that effort versus when they're not. If you really feel like I don't know if I can do this anymore, and I don't want to do this, and I'm okay with the risk of losing this person if I end the relationship, and maybe it'll sober him up for somebody else, and then you'll find somebody that does put in that effort. But it's hard for me to say one way or another. I think hopefully that gives you a couple things to think about, and hopefully makes you feel a little bit more validated, because that would be deeply hurtful. And just because you have OCD doesn't mean you have no good compass of what to do in situations. And maybe you're wrong. Maybe you choose wrong. I don't know what that would even mean, or if that's even really possible. I think it's just up to you. I hope that is helpful and answered any part of that question. Okay, that's it for this week's episode. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I said, okay, that's it for this week's episode probably 10 times. I don't know why I kept stuttering over my words. I think I'm getting hungry, but I kept stuttering over my words over and over again. And so sometimes I just feel like I have to confess that I have said that 1,000 times. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to support the podcast, as always, you can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And you can also leave comments on Spotify, which is pretty cool. I love when you guys comment on it. I might have missed some because sometimes the notifications don't get to me. So I'm sorry if I never replied to a Spotify comment. As well as you can support by going to YouTube and going and commenting, liking, subscribing, whatever on there on YouTube. I post all my podcasts on there with video as well. If you want to go above and beyond, you can post a little clip or post just something on your story about my podcast. That would be greatly appreciated. Or share it with somebody that you think might be interested in this type of a podcast. Thank you as always for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Happy Valentine's Day, I believe. I hope you have an amazing Valentine's Day and are treated with lots of love. Take yourself out, be kind to yourself, and love you guys. Bye. 우회전 taking a ride to Todayy 눈치 보면서 들어가 할 때 찾아 나머진 바빠 개설레임 바꾸는 사람들